Fernando. And Fernando said, well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. This is my pleasure again to host this webinar, and this is in cooperation with Annex 7 of ISGAN and Annex 8. But for you to know more about ISGAN, I will just give a brief introduction. ISGAN is the International Smart Grid Action Network, and it's the only global government-to-government forum for smart grids. We are divided in different working groups, so what we call annexes, and we do different activities, as you can see on your right. So we have drivers for and examples. We have cost-benefit analysis, strategic communication, the power system transitions, and the ISGAN Academy. That this is part of the work that we do from the ISGAN Academy. So what is ISGAN? ISGAN is a joint initiative from the International Energy Agency, the Energy Technology Network, and the Clean Energy Ministerial. And the idea of ISGAN is to have a strategic platform to support high-level government knowledge transfer and action to accelerate the deployment and the development and deployment of smart, cleaner, and of the electricity grids around the world. So ISGAN, currently we have 25 members, as you can see on this map, from all the different continents. So what's the value proposition of ISGAN? We have strategic partnerships, as I said before, the International Energy Agency, the Clean Energy Ministerial, the World Smart Grid Forum, the Mission Innovation Actions, and also we are aiming to have a broad international expert network. So we have experts from around the world, global, regional, and national policy support for different government policies, and also we basically do a lot of knowledge sharing, technical assistance, and project coordination. So how we do this? We do this through conference presentation, policy brief, technology brief, technical papers, discussion papers, casebook, workshops, and webinars as this one. So with this, I give the floor for today's webinar on the ReFlex project and guidebook presentation. Thank you very much for attending the webinar.
Yes, thank you, Jose and Fernando, for the introduction. As I said, we want to today give you a presentation on the ReFlex project and on the guidebook. First of all, I want to thank the ISGAN Academy and the Leonardo Energy for providing the platform and the announcement and the promotion of this event. Furthermore, I want to thank the Euronet Smart Energy Systems, a transnational research program within the European Union and its member states, which allowed us to provide these insights from the meta-study ReFlex, which took 3 years now, is at the end of its time, and I was honored and pleased to be the coordinator of this. I want to give you just this brief overview of what you can await. I will briefly talk about the ReFlex project, our understanding of replication and flexibility, as this was the key topic of the project. Present briefly which kind of use cases we were talking about. I'll give you an overview of the guidebook aims and target groups, an insight on the checklist that we had, on the replication concept that we developed, and on two particular tools that we developed. The one is the community of practice, and the other one a simulation tool, the ReFlexBox, which is then presented by the colleagues from IFA to you, finally learning some recommendations. The ReFlex project, ReFlex meaning replication concept for flexible smart grids, financed by Euronet, has the main objectives to establish a community of practice between practitioners and researchers from 8 smart grid demo regions in 4 European countries. It aims to develop a replicability concept and guidelines of this encompassing over technical, economic, and other aspects. And finally, to elaborate on this ReFlex Guidebook for the replication of technologically feasible, economically viable, and user-friendly solutions for smart grids. If you want to have a look at the different demo regions that we were working with and collaborating, you can have a look at the mentioned website of ReFlex. The regions involved were in Sweden, Gotland, in Julia, Malmö, in Germany, Wüstenrot, in Switzerland, Biel-Benken near Basel, and Roll near Lausanne, as well as in Austria, Salzburg, the city of Salzburg, and the 2 smaller cities, Hartberg and Güssing. The project partners were 50 at all from technology providers, research organizations, to energy sector organizations. And here the important and interesting thing in this project for us was also that we had a combination of companies like E.ON or Salzburg Netze, which are working in an unbundled regime, but also from Switzerland, Romand Energy and EBM, who still, during the course of the project, were still not bundled, as the legal situation is differently in Switzerland. And we had 3 Stadtwerke, kind of small energy utilities, still bundled, Güssing, Stadtwerke Hartberg, and in Germany, Wüstenrot. Now, which kind of replication, which flexibilities are we talking about? Smart grids and distributed energy systems have been identified as key elements of the energy transition. Many innovative solutions have been developed to deal with the flexibility challenge, going along with the integration of renewable energy into local energy grids. Engineers widely agreed and agree that technologies are at hand and many use cases are technically feasible, which has been demonstrated in many research and demonstration projects across Europe under optimized framework conditions. So now the question is, how can those technically feasible, innovative use cases, which are tackling the flexibility challenge, be replicated and deployed in other locations and in other contexts? As any practitioner can tell, simply copying solutions which have been, for example, promoted through conferences and site visits will not work. In the ReFlex replicability concept, the focus is on the replication and transfer of smart grid solutions to new locations in different contexts. Our concept of replication is broad. It understands replication as targeted problem-solving attempts of learning from one experiment or innovation project and transferring the successful elements of this demonstration project to another site. And the concept comprises the different distinctions made in the current literature regarding the deployment of feasible socio-technical solutions, as we want to call it. Often the main distinction is made between different forms of transfer of functionalities, as you can see in this slide, or scaling up, so scaling within a given socio-technical concept. But also more far-reaching transfer of functionalities and or upscaling strategies in other socio-technical contexts. The transfer of functionalities in those other socio-technical contexts is considered here as adaptive replication. Here. Replication in the narrow sense of this guidebook, or when different forms of system transformation, institutional change are involved, upscaled replication or transformative replication. Deployment in the same socio-technical context includes different accumulation and scaling up strategies, such as the rollout of new projects, products and services, or the expansion of pilot projects, or the expansion of the system. Now, it took quite some time in the project to have a shared understanding of what flexibility is and what for it is. We came to the conclusion that it's important to distinguish between two different kinds of flexibility. On the one side, flexibility of power, meaning the system, the electricity grid or the energy system has to be at each instant of time in any location follow certain rules regarding the quality of electricity, stability of local grids, and the availability of capacity. At the same time, there is also need for flexibility in energy logistics, the optimal use of overproduction of renewable energy sources, the temporal and seasonal shift of decarbonization in the energy system, the managing of complex flows and stocks of energy, and the just-in-time provision of electricity, so to say. So this is introducing a new term, energy logistics, which we find useful for further discussions. Now, coming to the different use cases that we were working on, we have developed 4 different use cases. They address the flexibility challenges, which either primarily deal with the flexibility of power, the availability of quality of power at any instant of time, or the flexibility in terms of energy logistics, flexibility in balancing renewable energy production and use over a specific period of time. 2 of the use cases are related to grid management involving grid operators and active consumers. That means business to client, so to say. And 2 of the use cases are referring to business energy services. I'll come to those later on as well. Now, a key tenet in the current literature, also coming partly from parallel projects at the EU level and elsewhere, which has been could be empirically confirmed and specified in the ReFlex project. It's the importance of socio-technical context dimensions that has to be considered as preconditions, incentive, and shaping factor of the deployment processes. Those dimensions are space and geography, technical functionality and technology, institutions and regulations, social and political practices, networks and culture, and the economic dimension. In those dimensions, the following ReFlex use case components are important. Physical infrastructure and potential for local energy generation, functionalities in energy systems and the key technological components and configurations, as well as digitalization, information communication technology, etc. The organization and actor group involvement is key, as well as to have a mission model which is also going beyond economic benefits, and also important is the stakeholder constellation. The business models of private and public actors have to be considered and are important to look at when you want to replicate use cases. And particularly collaborative business models are important, as it's not about one company to make profit, but increasingly there has to be a lot of cooperation in these business models. The socio-technical context factors are the spatial and geographical environment, particularly the size of replication sites. Upscaling only makes sense in a certain dimension when we talk about replication, and climate conditions are also very important. Furthermore, the relevant technological system boundaries have to be taken into account, energy grid configuration and interoperability, for example. With respect to institutions and regulations, the EU national legislation on competition and energy market regulation is important. Unbundling was already mentioned, energy market institutions, as well as standardization. For the socio-political dimension, important are cultural norms, social practices of end users, also sometimes referred to as user behavior, as well as citizens' acceptance and trust of institutions. Finally, the economic dimension is important to consider. A culture of cooperation is important, as well as with respect to its high cost of coordination. We see that it's still possible, although costly. At the same time, apart from microeconomic factors, macroeconomic benefits for the whole economy are important. Now coming to the ReFlex Guidebook, what it provides, it shall help private and public actors and stakeholders such as municipalities, and this is new to most other projects that are dealing with this topic. Municipalities are also a target group, local grid operators, distribution system operators, as well as bundled energy utilities and energy suppliers, and their endeavor to replicate and transfer smart solutions to their local context. The publication of this book is expected in more or less 2 months. It will be a brochure. It will be also available online. And the guidebook will outline 4 particular use cases based on examples from the 8 demo sites of the ReFlex project. Both target groups already established, and new actors in the energy system, as well as municipalities, can focus on the use case they are interested in. So we will help them to find the relevant information. So the 4 ReFlex use cases will be presented in part 1 of the guidebook. The first use case is short-term voltage stabilization local electricity grid. This is based on empirical evidence from Biel-Benken, Switzerland, for load shifting and load management of the energy utility, and from Salzburg, particularly the village of Pöstendorf, for short-term local low-voltage grid stabilization. Furthermore, the demo sites of the island of Gotland, Sweden, and Roll Lausanne in Switzerland provide valuable evidence. For this, the target group are local grid operators and local grid owners. So it's also important to differentiate between the operators and the owners when looking into replication. The second use case is energy management for business parks. This is based on empirical evidence from Hartberg, Austria, for optimized use of locally generated renewable energy in a business park. The target group for this is obviously business park owners and operators, but also local grid operators collaborating with those business parks. Number 3 is load shifting for load management of energy utilities. This is based on the implementation of the smart district heating system in Malmö, respectively Hyllie, a greenfield development site close to the Öresund Bridge, to use the building stock for load management purposes, as well as furthermore the example of Güssing is taken here into account. And the target group for this are municipalities, district heating system operators, public or private utilities in this respect. The property owners of houses as well were also involved there, which is quite interesting and quite a challenge, and facility managers. The fourth use case is a shared use of local low temperature resources, which is based on empirical evidence from Wüstenrot, Germany, on large community-owned low temperature collector combined with heat pumps of a newly built neighborhood. And here, particularly municipalities should be interested in this, as well as house owners, facility managers. The guidebook works in that way that the second part is also dealing with different tools, and we will come to that in short. In different phases of developing those replication projects, different tools can help to be applied. The ReFlex Checklist, the ReFlex Unit of Practice, and the ReFlexBox. For the ReFlex Checklist, I will only give few indications. You can read through it when you get the recording of this. In the different dimensions that we already discussed, for example, it's important always to ask, are relevant geographical and climate conditions similar? Can the same technological components be implemented? Is there a profitable business case for the private and public economic actors involved? Does the use case make sense from the economic perspective for the municipality or the region, not only for businesses? Do the same national legal frameworks and standardization rules apply, like the requirement of unbundling, tariff models, grid codes, the rules for licensing of distribution systems, as well as the energy market institutions regarding the room for maneuver, flexibility of local energy utilities to act. Briefly to the community of practice. The community of practice is a group of practitioners which share the same interests and challenges in specific areas. Through a moderated process of sharing information, expertise, and experiences, members learn from each other and can develop personally and professionally. To get a community going and to sustain them over time, it is crucial that participants regularly meet in order to discuss shared challenges and try to find practical solutions. So from the demo site experiences, communities of practice help to learn from failure and to generate new knowledge in order to plan, decide, and co-create based on this. Why did we choose community of practice in our project, and why we think it's important also for replication is that you don't have to make mistakes twice. If you join a community of practice, you can learn from each other and not to learn from mistakes by your own mistakes, and by that you can speed up the process of developing and implementing replication projects. As we experience failures that are not communicated broadly, so it needs an atmosphere of trust, and the communities of practice have provided this. Here just a citation of a feedback that we got from one of our project colleagues from Julia. She just sent us this message and said, I just have to say how much the ReFlex project has made an impact for me, even being only, in parentheses, knowledge sharing. It has been eye-opening and also very stimulating to work with all the smart colleagues in the project. So this was really nice for us. We had 3 intensive community of practice workshops during the time of 2 years. Okay, so now coming to the next tool that we developed, I now want to hand over to Jubei and Enrique from IFA. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Klaus, and also hello from my side. I'm Enrique Krimmers from IFA. I would like to present to you the ReFlexBox, which is beside the, or in addition to the knowledge transfer and the community of practice, a tool that we have developed in the context of the ReFlex project to address the challenge of replication and scalability, with the background or with the idea in mind that the scalability and replicability questions increase or bring a new aspect of complexity which is added and which cannot be simply tackled by let's say classical approaches or Excel calculations in order to address or assess how flexibility will impact future energy systems. So the context of and the objectives of this tool are that we developed a tool for planning and decision makers to assess flexibility of smart grid solutions, which actually can increase the efficiency of energy systems, as Klaus has mentioned before, through different means, so allowing for higher renewable penetration, avoiding grid reinforcement, reducing emissions. To do all this in very early planning stages of districts or of urban planning projects. So the ReFlexBox tool helps or aims to help to better understand and disseminate the use of energy flexibility for smart grid projects. This is the second objective of the tool, as the concept of flexibility is sometimes very difficult, I would say, or not easy to understand, and the added value of flexibility, I would say, is not always obvious to decision makers. So to tackle this challenge, we developed a multi-method modeling tool, which is mainly agent-based, system dynamics, a bottom-up approach in which we assess flexibility at the household and the building level and scale this up to higher levels. We address buildings in the Middle European area, and the scale-up allows us to go at different representative scales and locations. So the setup of our building model represents flexibility inherently. So we have a demand and in energy which is static typically, both in electricity and in heat, which we can see here on this slide. at this place and this place, and we have our connection to the grid, of course. We add flexibility levers in the system through PV panels coupled to a battery system, and through power-to-heat devices which are coupled to heat storages, which allow, for example, for load shifting. So we can already see here that flexible energy and its availability is dynamic in time, depends on many different factors of this dynamic system, such as the state of charge of our storages, the fluctuating solar radiation, and so on. So actually the flexibility provided by these means is what we try to target with our ReFlexBox tool, which allows to identify this flexible energy and map it and quantify it. So on the next slide, we can see the features and boundaries of our tool. So we have worked on a predefined household energy system setup that you can see in the figure, which is actually consisting in this power-to-heat devices and the batteries, which emerge from the different demo sites that we analyzed in the ReFlex project. The feature of replicability is addressed through a transfer function which is given in the tool, which actually allows us to transfer the results to different locations, and an upscaling feature which allows us to change the number of buildings and see their effect on the flexibility potential. We also can change the efficiency of our buildings by increasing, for example, the energy consumption, and we have an output actually that we have worked out in this project together with the partners also in the community of practice, which is what we call the flexibility potential, so which is the shiftable energy in terms of kilowatt hours that can be moved to another instant in time. And we express this in a more technical way, which is thought for people who better understand actually the technical aspects of our system. And we have also simplified the expression of this flexibility in terms of additional capacity to charge electric vehicles without any grid reinforcement. I will explain this on the next slide, because this is an analogy that helps to better understand flexibility. So in the case where we have our system without flexibility, we have a base heat and heat load like in this chart here. If we would like to add additional electric vehicles to charge, we might be going over the boundaries of our power grid. So actually we are in need of a grid reinforcements to ensure that these blue boxes, which represent the electric vehicle charging, can be done at any moment in time. In the case of a flexible energy system where we have flexibility, we have these green boxes, which are actually our flexibility potential, which are identified by our tool, and they are the pieces of energy, let's say, the Tetris blocks that can be shifted to other moments in time. So as you see, not all of them can be shifted, only some of them, which are closely related to our flexible technologies, so to the batteries and to the heat storages. So in this case, if we would like to charge our electric vehicles, we could just move some of these green boxes to a later time and stay at the same level of maximum power that is contracted by our grid and charge 2 additional vehicles in this case. So this is actually the concept of representing flexibility in the tool, the simplified concept. And now my colleague Shubei will present a short demo of the tool, which will show the different approaches used to model this flexibility.
Yes. So
we will need the video
from
to be shown from Fernando now, please.
Okay, you can click play. So now we are on the user interface of the tool. The users have options to change the climate zones where the grid is located, the building numbers from 0 to 100, energy efficiency to increase or decrease by 10%, 20%, as well as for the installations, the user could activate or deactivate the PV and battery. So now we click on the run, and what you can, it takes time, and now what you can see is that each small icon is representing one building, indicating its running state of the heat pump, boiler, battery, and other energy storages. In this use case, we have 100 buildings, as you can count. On the lower part, the energy performance and its flexibility potential are plotted. And now we are navigated to the building level. The user can look at the performance of the building into detail, as well as potential to increase or decrease its load. And as well, the dynamic KPIs are plotted at the same time as the system is running. And at the end of the simulation, KPIs including the thermal demand, including this load share and PV self-consumption rate will be presented. Moreover, how to use this quantified flexibility potential is illustrated by the additional number of vehicles which can be implemented on site without enhancing the grid, as told by Enrique. So that's it. We had a short look into the tool, and now we can go back to the slides, and I will hand it over back to Enrique.
Yes, thanks. So we have two examples of results that we run through with our tool. So these are simulations that we run over 1 year. In this case, we have made a test of adding technology, so actually a comparative example of our energy system setup as shown before, only with heat storages and with the power-to-heat devices, which are driven in a flexible way. And a second case in which additionally we activate flexibility from this battery and PV system. So we can see here that through adding a battery and PV system, in this case, we can double our flexibility potential from additional 31 electric vehicles that could be charged by only activating the flexibilities from the power-to-heat devices to 64 electric vehicles that can be charged without increasing the grid capacity, of course, in both cases, when adding this PV and battery system. In the lower term, of course, in the lower part of the charts, we can see the distribution of flexibility to increase and to decrease load over different hours of the year, which is quite largely increased by the addition of batteries. And this flexibility, of course, can also be used for different means. So, for example, to integrate fluctuating wind power in the system, or to provide system services, and so on. So this is just the example that we wanted to show with electric vehicles, which is the simplified representation of flexibility for decision makers, as well as, I'm not sure if the screen is still online because we just, okay, we're back again. So this is the case of adding some technologies. We have this more technical flexibility potential. In the second case, we wanted to show the concept of replication throughout different locations in Europe. So we can see our reference site, which is in Biel in Switzerland, which we saw before already with power-to-heat and battery devices. And we made a transfer exercise, so by using meteorological data and inputs for a site in Sweden, in Malmö, and here we can see that the difference in the flexibility potential is quite low throughout Europe, which means that we can actually transfer and replicate results through different places in Europe without having a large impact on our flexibility potential, which here is less than 10%. So as information for you, we provide a demo of the tool which can be run in two ways. So we have an online demo version of this which you can run in your browser just by clicking this link, which we will now copy in the chat. And we have also a full downloadable version that you can download where you can run the simulation with more features for a full year, replicating sites to different locations and also changing meteorological data. So this is a more complete version that you have to download and run on your computer, and it is also available on this site. So we are happy on any feedback that you can give us on this tool. We also would like to provide an outlook of this tool. So for the moment, this tool has been used for the Middle European area. So as you have seen, we have mainly technologies, heat pumps, power-to-heat devices, which are used in colder climatic zones. So of course, there is adaptation possible to add technologies like HVAC systems or other appliances that might add other flexibilities for other locations. And also we are performing currently more detailed studies by analyzing the technical flexibility potential, as you can see here shown in a carpet plot over a year, and matching this potential, for example, to other requirements for flexibility, such as electricity markets or balancing markets, and so on. So we're available for any questions on this tool on the email address shown here. So I give the back to Klaus on the good presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Enrique and Xiaobei, for this really great presentation of this really innovative new tool using agent-based modeling and other modeling. Now, wrapping up, we come to the last part of our presentations, the learning and recommendations. The motto of the guidebook is don't copy, co-create. Arnold Schwarzenegger, after visiting Güssing, which is one of our demo sites, proclaimed that the whole world shall become like Güssing. As he was so impressed by the many activities regarding a renewable energy-based local energy system. However, transferring the many interesting solutions to other locations, that means replicating them in other contexts, does not mean copying or duplicating a blueprint, as the statement might guess, like, for example, the blueprints copying or duplicating from Güssing. As experienced in the many discussions and interactions in workshops and site visits throughout the ReFlex communicative practice events, intense cooperation, collaboration is required in the innovation process, as we are dealing with complex challenges and highly integrated solutions. Thus, co-creation is the way forward to replicate the 4 ReFlex use cases in this guidebook that we're presenting. So, learnings from the ReFlex for replication. What we identified quite early is that demo sites are based on peculiar context conditions, some of which that cannot be copied are listed here. Public funding is often provided as use cases are not yet profitable. Replication projects should go towards profitability. Organizational and personal overlaps of key actors are very peculiar and can often not be copied in other contexts. It's also very often important to construct laboratory conditions for testing technological features. This requires financial incentives from project funding for end users, which should not be the case in replication projects. Otherwise, you cannot test in a real-world environment. Very often, or normally, the involved end users are highly motivated, interested, and educated, which you hardly find in the replication case. So compatibility and adaptable context conditions and dimensions are important and thus require co-creation. The success factors for flexibility solutions that we have identified are shared visions and what we call mission models, so that mission models meaning that instead of business models where it's about who pays, normally the customer, the question is who benefits, and this need not be only the businesses, it can also be other stakeholders and actors. Learning from and with practitioners in community of practice really helped a lot. Also in our case, the co-creation and unconventional cooperation is important and needed. It should be looked at overlapping networks. There has to be an interaction between policy, economy, research. Many actors are involved, and also end users should be involved. And business models are very often collaborative, not only for single private enterprises, but have to be in a cooperative way. Yeah, and then finally, there needs to be room for change regarding the context factors. If you can't change them, then you cannot, it doesn't make sense to look at these use cases at all. Now, towards adaptive replication of use cases, ReFlex should help target groups to get from self-optimized, I'm not sure if you still can see, yes, get from self-optimized demo sites to reproduce functionalities of good practice solutions, from demo sites to replication, rollout, and expansion, from our, so to say, our demo sites to other replication sites that can be all over Europe, the place. Ultimately, this should lead to fully integrated solutions, but this is a long way ahead. The final recommendation now is, which is not in the guidebook for the guidebook target groups, but for policymakers, are to establish regulatory sandboxes. A first step is taken already in the set plan activities, which are preparing implementation in order for a new replication that requires them to be implemented as new policy instruments. Secondly, face-to-face intensive community of practice formats should be supported as much as possible. As the experiences with ReFlex showed, the critical mass for such communities of practice is beyond a demo site. It becomes even more fruitful for practitioners when there is a focus on concrete hardware, software, or institutional aspects, which could be dealt with as a part of the knowledge community activities of Euronet, smart energy systems, where you have a higher critical mass of practitioners that can share the knowledge. Last but not least, transdisciplinary research and practitioners from several actor groups should be working hand in hand for innovation in a co-creation process. For this, research and innovation program and calls needs to be made ready, providing room and resources for intensive interaction between engineers on one side and researchers from social science and humanities, as well as practitioners. So this summed up our findings, and I want to thank all listeners, the audience, for your participation, and looking forward to your